So token relations, like at a base level, we're trying to be all-in-one service provider that aims to connect blockchains, token projects, and crypto protocols with their ecosystems. People who have a financial stake in their organization or have a general interest through direct communication.
This content is brought to you by BitGo, which is one of the top crypto custodians in the crypto industry. BitGo works with many big companies and brands, such as Pantera Capital, Bitstamp, and Bitcoin IRA. Nike also selected BitGo to power its wallets for its NFTs. And BitGo has many great services, such as hot wallets, custodial wallets, self-managed cold wallets, and NFT wallets. Many institutions trust BitGo with its top-level security and incredible services, such as being able to deploy your capital while it's in custody, which includes lending, borrowing, trading, staking, DeFi access, and more. If you'd like to learn more about BitGo, please visit bitgo.com, link in the description. Welcome to the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and with me today is Jacquelyn Melinek, who's the co-founder of Token Relations. Jacquelyn, great to have you on.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Jacquelyn, you and I have spoken on the interwebs for a while.
Yes.
Because you were a crypto reporter at TechCrunch, and we talked about promotions and different things and what's happening in the industry. But before we get there, I want to learn more about your background. Where you're from and what's your professional background.
Yeah, so I am originally from Westchester, New York. I live in New York City now. Westchester is like a suburb outside of the city. And I was a professional journalist up until, last month when I launched Token Relations, and now I've kind of shifted into that entrepreneurial role.
And what made you want to be a reporter in the crypto industry?
Yeah, so when I initially graduated from college, I did an internship at Bloomberg, and they put me on the oil trading desk. And I knew nothing about oil, I knew nothing about energy, but when you get given an assignment there, you're like, of course, I'm happy to do that. And so I covered oil trading for them. And then when that internship was wrapping up, I went on to cover energy markets for S&P Global. And while I was doing that, I kind of felt like it was a lot of red tape. It was very old school, it was boring. No offense to people in energy. But it's just like the same major companies are controlling the industry. And a lot of the sourcing that I had, none of them really wanted to talk on record or could talk on record. They would genuinely get in trouble for doing that. And so everything was very like walled gardens. And I was living down in Houston, Texas at the time, because that's one of the major energy hubs in the US. And I wanted to move back to New York. That's where I'm originally from. I want to be closer to friends and family. And they have an office here, and they basically said no. So I started looking for new opportunities. And I was between one covering asset management at a very big traditional media organization, or another one covering crypto at what was a small startup at the time called Blockworks. And I spoke to my mentors in my life, people that, I looked up to, went to for career advice, and almost everyone told me not to take the crypto job. They're like, what if Bitcoin goes to zero? And I was like, what if, But at the time I was younger and I didn't have any like extreme financial ties. I'm not married, I don't have kids. The worst that would happen would be that I would have to like pay my rent if Bitcoin actually did go to zero, which of course we know it's not going to zero. And so I really found crypto to be super interesting. I love the team at Blockworks and I wanted to go for it. And so I was there for about 9 months, and then I got poached by TechCrunch, and I was there for about 2 years or so. And now I'm starting my own company.
Yeah, that's exciting. Before we get to your company, I'm very curious as to when things clicked for you around Bitcoin, because you may hear about it, you may work in the industry, but
Right.
have you had your aha moment, like, whoa, okay, I get it, and now I'm
Mm.
going all in?
Yeah, so I first encountered Bitcoin specifically when I was in high school.
Mhm.
I sent money to buy Bitcoin to buy something on the internet.
Wow.
And that would have definitely been worth a lot more today than the item I bought at the time. And yeah, I was always interested by it. I heard about it through college, um, throughout college. And, I had friends who were constantly dabbling in crypto trading specifically. And I knew about the industry, but I never knew how vast and deep it was until I really became a crypto reporter. And it was like the world's steepest learning curve. But
Mhm.
once you like get up that curve, you're fine. And so I spent like the first 3 months at Blockworks, like diving deep into every piece of like white papers, podcasts, research reports, etc., that I could get my hands on just to really understand the space a lot better. And for me, that aha moment wasn't like one specific thing, but it was like a culmination of events, talking to founders, innovators in the space who are genuinely building for the betterment of society and seeing and using this technology firsthand. There were just a ton of aha moments, which I think is special.
That's awesome. And as
Yeah.
your time as a crypto reporter, was there any crazy stories or anything that you're like, man, this is nuts? Was it like FTX? Anything
Oh
that you
my
can share
gosh.
there?
I think the Terra Luna collapse was really crazy because that was actually around the time after the FTX Bahamas event, or it was during it, if I'm remembering correctly. And everything was just, it was right after FTX Bahamas, actually. And it was kind of like a moment of disbelief. There's a lot of moments of disbelief in this industry where you're like, is this actually happening? And
Right.
so with the Terra Luna situation, just seeing the charts plummet and seeing the aftermath of what happened with hedge funds and other companies that were entangled in that mess um, was just remarkable in very bad ways. And then I think also the FTX situation was another moment where you're like watching it unravel in real time. You're constantly putting out articles and stories of what's happening. Things are always changing. Like one tweet could change the market.
Yeah.
And it's every day in crypto as a crypto reporter is like completely different. You never know what you're gonna do. Like sometimes I would tell like my editors like, "Oh, I'm working on this week," and then all of a sudden the world would be like, "Nope, you're actually focusing on this," and you have to like completely shift your gear and look at what's going on and be able to share that information in a way that educates everyone in the community in a way that they couldn't just access online, And you also have to make it original. Um, and so that was always a fun but challenging task throughout the time I was a reporter. And there were also really rewarding moments, of course, like the comeback story of Solana, covering that is always great. The wild, weird, quirky moments in the industry, the wins against the SEC, those are, landmark situations. And or like the spot Bitcoin ETF approval,
Mhm.
another awesome time. And we're just sitting here like monitoring filings and like keeping up with everything to be the first one to get that out there, or even like SBF's guilty verdict and his sentencing. It might not be exciting for him, but I think a lot of people in the industry wanted that kind of justification. And so those moments are big moments for sure, but special nonetheless. Yeah,
Yeah, and especially like you mix like you mentioned Twitter, like a tweet can move markets, but crypto
100%.
Twitter in itself is just wild, right? Memes
Mhm.
and degens and all that. I'm sure it's unlike anything else in other industries.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point because a long time ago, when I first was a crypto reporter, like, about a year into it, someone once told me, like, you're a part of the reporter community. Stop acting like you're a part of the crypto community. And I'm like, first of all, I'm just engaging with the community. Like I'm not trying to put any bias out there. I'm not trying to act a certain way. I'm just having fun with it. And I also feel like being a crypto reporter is very different than being any other form of reporter. And you have to be passionate about the industry. You have to be interested in like curious. You can't just be a passive reporter. Like political reporters, they cover things solely as facts. They're not engaging directly with the technology that politics are built upon. Maybe they'll like work with the surveys or something like that, but it's not the same. Whereas in crypto, you really do have to test these things out to fully understand it. And if you're not testing it out and you're not engaging with people in the space and understanding like the crypto culture and everything else in between, you're not going to do as good of a job as someone else who does. And there are reporters out there in crypto, who don't care about this industry. They just see it as a paycheck or, they're fully skeptical. They don't like it at all. They don't see any value. And you could see that in their writing and the way they look at this. And for me, like I always felt like yes, I was a part of the reporter community 100%, but I was also a part of the crypto community. And I think that was extremely valuable in the way that I covered things. I built professional relationships and I got to know the industry in such a better light because of how passionate I was about this technology.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's such a great point. And I think you can talk about something if you've experienced it and, did some testing with it, trial and error. How
Yeah.
can you give a full review of Bitcoin or other blockchains if you haven't moved a Bitcoin, if you haven't experienced a wallet
Yeah.
set up and seed phrases and all that? So, great points. Now, I think it's a good segue into token relations. Tell
Mhm.
us about token relations. What's your mission and how did it come about?
Yeah. So token relations, like at a base level, it's we're trying to be an all-in-one service provider that aims to connect blockchains, token projects, and crypto protocols with their ecosystems. People who have a financial stake in their organization or have a general interest through direct communication. Of course, there are avenues like Twitter, Discord, Telegram, etc. that exist today. We're not trying to replace that, but we see those as one to many. And a lot of times, like if someone tweets something out, you'll give it a like, but you don't really understand like what XYZ upgrade really means. Or if someone says they're announcing a launch of something, what does that really mean for you as an ecosystem player? And so we're trying to build smarter relationships and connections between these blockchains and other partners to connect with their ecosystems across the board. We've partnered with Optimism, Avalanche, and Aptos publicly, and we're rolling out more partnerships in the coming weeks and months. And we're not PR, media, marketing, etc. We like to refer to it as like a third bucket where like the public markets have shareholders, letters, earnings, etc. And they've obviously perfected that in their own way. But the crypto market is very different than the general public market. And we're trying to rebuild that model in a crypto-centric framework that applies to the industry and like fits that ethos and like cultural zeitgeist that I talked about before and customizing it to fit the needs of our partners.
Mm. Um, so are you building like a platform or is it more of a service where you're, I don't know, amplifying or breaking down some of the content that's put out in the tweet? But like you said, so many
Mhm.
people are like, if they're a token holder, what does this mean? Like, what does this mean for me?
Right.
How are you executing the communication?
Right. So right now it's pretty like we're in this V1 era, I like to call it, and it's like Web2 mechanics. Like we're getting distribution lists, we're building out audiences on our front. Me and Pomp have backgrounds in building out audiences and like engaging with communities. And so we're doing it directly through email right now. And that's for the reoccurring newsletters for our launch partners. And then we're going to be rolling out webinars at the end of the month for them. These quarterly webinars and the biannual reports will come down the line. But we're also building out a tech platform to answer your question. And so that's something that we see coming in the coming months. We're working with engineers on the back end to build this out and kind of solve what we like to call a data problem. And it's an information problem in the sense that there's so much data out there, but it's not being collected in the right way. Obviously, as we partner with more and more businesses, it's something that needs to be automated to an extent, but also there's the human side to it, right? So like we'll have people who could explain what happened and why it matters, but in the automated side of things, we will be able to kind of gather everything that's happening for each of these blockchains or products or protocols, et cetera, and be able to disseminate that information in a way that makes sense to the ecosystem.
Mm. Now, I know I'm going to ask some questions here, but I don't know if you can answer them because I don't want you to give
Sure.
away your secret sauce, so to
Yeah,
speak,
right.
right? So let's say you have different demographics in the crypto um, market, and let's take Cardano just as an example.
Hmm.
There's ADA token holders. Now, some may be on crypto Twitter, some may be on YouTube mostly. Some are like, I prefer newsletters, or some are in a Telegram group. You got people all over the place. And as a
Right.
podcast host, I see that, right? I have to meet them where they're at. How are you planning to do that? Is it just simply putting together the proper communication, the proper information, and getting it on those platforms? Or is it vice versa, where you're aggregating from all those platforms and telling people to come to your, I don't know, system or platform that you're working on, if that makes sense?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's more of the latter, but we're also working with these teams to kind of make this a mutually beneficial thing because it makes sense for them to go reach their audiences and be like, hey, we partnered with this team. We want to access you better. And we want you to access our information better. Come get it here. And we want it to be an all-in-one kind of service where you don't need to be constantly looking at like Twitter or Discord or the bajillion notifications you get to get access to this information. I think it's a problem that blockchains have where, they have so much going on 24/7, and that's a great problem to have, but it's a problem nonetheless. And imagine how the people in the ecosystem feel, like
Yeah.
their full-time job isn't, monitoring these blockchains. So maybe for some of them, they do that for fun, but they want to be informed and educated and activated. And we find that the best way to do that is by providing everything all in one place. And that's what we're trying to build out here.
I love the idea, and I say that not because you're on the podcast, but I've
Thank you.
seen I've seen different blockchain projects where developers are complaining, token
Mm,
holders are complaining, We haven't seen anything. What are they working on? We haven't. What's going on over there, right? I've seen those questions on crypto Twitter and people commenting on YouTube, like this blockchain's dead. There's no activity. But then if you look at some of the stats or GitHub or whatever, you see
mhm,
there's activity, but just the communication's not there. They're not seeing. I think a lot of people correlate some of these activities with price. If the price not moving up, that means nothing's happening. Or
mhm.
if the company is not great at tweeting out or whatever it is, oh, nothing's happening. But they are actually working on things. So I think there's definitely a need there. And I've seen, I won't mention which blockchain or community because I don't want to throw anybody on the bus, but I've seen the thing, those concerns come up in questions like what's happening, what's being built. So I think there's definitely a need for your service.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I feel like, that is kind of what we're trying to fix as well. We want these ecosystems to feel like they have that relationship with the foundations or teams that are building out these blockchains or projects, like we mentioned. And so that's where the webinars come in. I'll moderate things, we'll talk with them like a casual conversation, but it's also giving updates on like maybe something that happened like 2 months ago that really never got followed up with, or the ecosystem doesn't know much about. And then also opening up the floor for Q&A for the exact reason that you mentioned, that these people want answers, and not in a way to like attack them, but genuine curiosity to get updates that maybe they wouldn't be getting otherwise.
Absolutely. And I think the other aspect is look, not everyone is on the same technical level, and sometimes the
Hmm.
language being used by, the foundations or whatever it is can be complex. Even myself, who've been here since 2016, I'm like, what does this mean? I need to go take some time to read through this. But if
Right.
that can be broken down in layman's terms and communicated, even if it's an infographic, right? Or something
Hmm.
just visual, oh, I get it. This does this and this, versus here's a tweet that says, we're making this upgrade and it does this, but I don't know what that language means. And I can't imagine, newbies coming in who are token holders trying to understand this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that is exactly where my journalistic experience comes in. I make everything that is technical understandable in a non-technical way. And that's not to say like the developers who are reading these updates feel like it's so dumbed down and watered down, but it's just meeting everyone where they're at in a
Yeah,
way that either if they're already, technical and they already understand this, that they could gain something new. And then if they're not technical and they don't understand it at all, they're gaining a lot. And it kind of goes down to that like segmentation part where in the future developers can get more technical upgrades and or updates and understand like what's going on and how they could get involved, etc., and what's like new that they need to understand in a way that meets them where they're at. And then we could also do it in the non-technical way for the broader audience. And
mm.
that applies to, anyone from token holders to institutions who are watching, to VCs, to maybe even like I don't know, I don't want to say it, but regulators, so they could understand better like what's happening there.
So how did you and Pomp meet, and
Mhm.
how did this idea come about? Were you guys
Yeah, yeah.
like hey, let's start this? What's the story
Hmm.
behind that?
Yeah, to backtrack, like ahead of everything I kind of just told you is I've known Pomp for a number of years. We initially met because I was a reporter and he came to me. I think he just followed me on Twitter one day and like I was like, what is this big account doing following me? You know? And he DM'd me and was like, oh, would love to catch up. And we talk. And then, over time he just kind of came to me with like, either professional relationships or like exclusives on companies he was launching. And I've covered him in the past. So we just had this like professional relationship kind of like already established. And then I would say earlier this year, he reached out and asked if I was based in New York and if I wanted to get some coffee. And I was like, sure, let's do it. I really thought either this was going to be a pitch to cover something or he just wanted to catch up because that's just like the type of person that he is. And so we went to a coffee shop and we talked for about 90 minutes. And he asked how things were going. At the time, I was at TechCrunch. I was a senior crypto reporter there, and how things were going there, what I really wanted out of my career, and then this idea he had. And we talked about the idea, which is what token relations, like the VV1. So like we're in V1 now, but this was like the initial inception of the idea. And we kind of like went back and forth about the idea. And I was like, yeah, that's so interesting. So are you asking me to cover it? And he was like, no, I'm asking you to start a company with me. And
Wow.
I was like, oh, okay. Because I didn't want to be presumptuous and like assume that's what he was getting at, but so that changed the conversation a bit and we talked more. And then, of course, I did my due diligence, spoke to other people who started businesses with him. And I mean, I was pretty dead set on doing it. I'm really passionate about what we're building. And I don't think I would have left my previous role for anything.
Mm.
I got a lot of job offers from other media organizations and they're amazing institutions. But I was just very, very happy with what I was doing at TechCrunch. And so I always said, like, for me to leave TechCrunch to do something, it has to be like an extraordinary offer, an opportunity for me to build something that I'm really interested in.
That's awesome. So, how does it feel to be, is it a first time entrepreneur?
First time entrepreneur, yes.
Mhm.
It's definitely different as someone who constantly interviewed people and spoke to founders all the time. I can definitely empathize more with them now. And also being on the receiving end of interviewing is very different than interviewing itself. So that was an adjustment, but I think being a first-time founder, it's a lot of fun learning the ropes and how to do everything. Obviously, Pomp has built a number of companies, so it's nice to work with him hand in hand to build this out with him. And I'm just really excited about like what we're going to be doing.
Mm. Are you guys doing any type of capital raises or anything like that? Or right now you're just, building, heads down building?
Just heads down building. Obviously, Pomp is an entrepreneur and investor, so he is backing the company, and but we were profitable from day one. So I
Mm.
think we don't necessarily need funds right now, but if we do down the line, he said in the past, we'll do whatever it takes to win. So we'll hold him to that.
For sure. So what's on your roadmap for the remainder of the year?
Yeah, so we're hiring, we're building out a team in a conscious way. I don't want to overscale. I feel like so many times people are like, "Oh, your team needs to be bigger," or "How are you doing this?" And like we just want to do it in a way that makes sense and like fits our kind of like evolution, right? And so we're doing that, and then we're building out the tech platform later this year to further deepen that connection between those entities and their ecosystems and token holders. And we kind of like want to walk before we run, but also ship products and test out what does and doesn't work with the market and adjust accordingly. I feel like so many times startups will raise a ton of money and then they'll be building on the back end and then the hype is over or it wasn't a fit that they thought it would be. And we find that building the product and putting it out in the market and receiving market feedback is so valuable. And then, we could adjust and tinker it as needed, but just having it out there and like putting iterations out and kind of improving it over time is like the route that we see as the most makes sense.
Yeah, that's definitely the smart way to go about it and test the waters and do a lot of trial
Yeah.
and error. That's awesome. I'm excited for you guys. And let's talk about the crypto market at large. Um, Obviously, you're on the building side of things now.
Yeah.
What do you think is happening with the market? The Bitcoin ETFs were crazy, incredible run up for Bitcoin.
Hmm.
Do you foresee more run up later this year into 2025?
Yeah. Listen, I'm not like a perfect market analyst. I spoke to analysts throughout my career. But I think on the front of spot Bitcoin ETFs, we saw a lot of demand initially, which is great. That proved that there was a need for this. And then I think we're almost in like a little bit of a plateau moment where it takes time for these advisors to one, understand what spot Bitcoin ETFs are, two, get them improved internally, and three, then educate their user base, I guess is the simplest way to put it, or like their customers is how I should say it. And so right now we're at this position where I think that kind of segment is happening. And
Mm,
then maybe in a couple months' time, we'll see it go up more. I think also the conversations around the spot Ethereum ETFs and whether or not those will be delayed or denied is also up in the air. But right now, it's Bitcoin's moment to shine, especially with the spot Bitcoin ETFs that were approved back in January. And so it's good that they're not back to back because sometimes when you like offer too much, it
yeah.
kind of loses like the special value to it, in my opinion. And
Mhm.
so I don't think the SEC is looking at it that way, but I'm looking at it from like a tactical market
Sure.
standpoint. Um, and I think with the spot Bitcoin ETFs, like there's a lot of value there. And obviously, based off like JP Morgan and Wells Fargo and Susquehanna, like International Group, all these different entities buying a ton of Bitcoin through these vehicles proves the market need.
Mm. Now, the other hot topic is crypto regulations and its impact on politics and elections.
Hmm.
There's so many things happening. Last week, SOB 121, the SEC rule got repealed. The FIT bill in the House is coming up for a vote in a couple weeks. What are your
Hmm.
thoughts? And Donald Trump last week saying I support crypto. It's pretty crazy.
Right. No, I know. It was definitely like the hot topic on crypto Twitter for sure. And I mean, like the crypto space has a dire need for regulatory clarity. That's on one front. And then there's also a need for guidance and direction. I've said this before, but I think, people who are one issue voters, I think that's fair. It applies across the industry. And if that passion lies with crypto, I think that's totally fair. And I think Donald Trump, he kind of did a 180. I think during his
Yeah.
first term, he said he didn't really care for crypto, et cetera. But then in between this term, like last term, and then like his run up for this election, he, has a crypto wallet with millions of dollars in crypto in it. And he has his NFT collection, and his wife has launched NFT collections. And, him speaking at Mar-a-Lago saying, like, if you're pro crypto, vote for me. Like Biden doesn't know what he's talking about, paraphrasing, of course.
Yeah.
But maybe that would be something he would say. And I think there's a lot of value there in understanding that this is like a political tactic, but it's also, a stance on crypto that we haven't really gotten before. I think RFK Jr. has put out some stances before, but it isn't really something that is commonly talked about. And the Biden administration has made it pretty clear that they're not extremely pro crypto. And that's not to say like there aren't Democrats who are pro crypto. I think, in response to that bill, there were about 21 who were against it and they sided with the Republicans on that, if we're referring to like the stablecoin one. And I think it's hard to navigate in the US right now. And I hear it firsthand from founders and being a founder in this space, it's unclear. Instead of regulating the industry through new guidelines that can pertain to this industry, it's been done through enforcement, which is unfortunate for sure.
Yeah. And the thing I was telling people about with Donald Trump, forget about the person Trump, it could have been somebody else, but the fact that a former president and a
Hmm.
presidential candidate who is the candidate for the Republicans is saying this is significant. I think it just opens up a whole new door and it could cause game theory. Well, does that force Biden's hand to now say, well, I got to pander to the crypto
Hmm.
industry to get those votes and campaign donations? It just, I don't know. It was like a moment, like a tipping point politically. And once again, it's not Donald Trump per se, just that seat, that position that, that he's saying that. That's pretty incredible.
No, 100%. I think it's like 40 million Americans own crypto, something around that number. And that's a significant amount of voters. And whether or not, again, those people are one issue voters, some people might just own crypto and that's like not their passion,
Mm.
But then there are a fair amount of people who are building crypto companies who are deeply invested in this space that really do see that as their one issue vote or a weighing factor in a plethora of issues.
Yeah.
And whether or not that's something that the Biden administration sees valuable, that's up to them. They could also go against it and maybe gain some votes against people who are anti-crypto, So
Yeah.
there's a lot of routes that they could go. And I'm not like a political strategist, so this is beyond, my wheelhouse, but just as someone who's watching the market and has covered a lot of regulatory uncertainty in the space, that's how I'm looking at it.
Now, question for you. you covered like we were talking about before, FTX, Celsius, and boy,
Hmm.
2022 was
Oh my
brutal.
gosh, yeah.
Brutal. But then I feel like BlackRock has pushed away the dark, rainy clouds that were over the market, right? With these ETFs and all of Wall Street, Fidelity, and all these guys. So it's like we turned a new leaf, right? Where it's like I can't, people don't even think about FTX anymore. They don't think about
Mhm.
Celsius. It's like it almost like it never happened. So you think we're in the clear here? Like maybe we've learned our lessons. The adults in the room, so to speak, are here.
Um, I think the crypto industry has kind of moved on from the FTX situation, Celsius, etc. I think crypto is tired of hearing about it. Maybe the creditors aren't because they want their money back, but everyone else is like, enough of SBF. Let's just move on. And then I think the mainstream world outside of the crypto bubble still views the crypto industry as like the FTX collapse. A lot of people at the time when that happened, they didn't even know what it was, but they knew it was bad for the industry. And people were like texting me, like, "Oh, do you work
Mm.
for FTX?" And I'm like, "No, I don't work for FTX." But like, they don't even have an understanding of like the differences, like they
Right.
think Coinbase, FTX, all these things are like one thing. And that just shows like people outside of the crypto world really don't know much about what's going on in here. And you can't blame them. Like, I'm not a professional in like the electric vehicle world. I don't know why that came to mind, or like AI. But with the people inside the AI industry, they know like every single detail. And so for crypto, I think FTX has kind of been like, unfortunately, a taint on the industry to the external world, especially for political people who got duped by him and took his
Mhm.
donations. And so that's going to take some time to recover. But the crypto industry, has fraud and scams, but so does every industry out there. And I think people always like to point fingers at the crypto space, but we see that in the traditional financial world all the time. And we see it across every industry. It's not just unique to us. And that's just something that is a reminder. And there's also really great innovations going on in this space. And as long as we kind of like keep building towards that roadmap and focusing towards the future of like what's good instead of just like highlighting bad actors for views. I
Yeah.
think that's what's more valuable.
Well put. I got some wrap-up questions here for you. First, if you
Hmm.
could create your own metaverse, what would the theme be?
um, I I feel like maybe like a little like beach techno concert. Like you could have it like playing in the background. You could like go in there and hear like your favorite DJs and like the ocean waves and everything. That's like my ideal. That would be like my ideal day. So I'm creating my ideal day in the metaverse, I guess. That's where I'd go.
When you said that, I don't know why I thought about like the Greek islands like Santorini and Nacardia.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds about right. I just love the beach and like relaxing and
For
yeah.
sure, for sure. Same with me. I love the water. I love being at the beach. So that would be awesome. Rapid fire questions. Favorite food?
Okay. Um, I like Mexican food, maybe like tacos.
Favorite musician or band?
First one that comes to mind is Kanye West, like old Kanye, but I
Oh,
also like
old school.
techno, like Yellow Claw, Malpi, Dom Dolla, that side of the world, if your listeners know those people.
For sure.
Yeah.
Favorite movie?
Oh my gosh. I don't really watch movies often, but I don't know. A favorite movie. I don't think I have one. If people have good movies, let me know.
Favorite book?
Favorite crypto book that I've read would be Number Go Up by Zeke Fox.
Mhm.
I thought it was well written and entertaining, but favorite normal book that I've read recently was Without a Doubt by Surbi Sarna. She is one of the YC partners, and it's super interesting.
Awesome. And when you're not working on token relations, what are you doing for fun?
I love going for walks. I live in New York City. I try to walk everywhere and anywhere, even if it's an hour-long walk. And I also like doing yoga, cycling, running. That's kind of my fun thing, or going to concerts, if I can on the weekends, if I have the time now. And yeah, cooking. I like cooking.
Awesome. Jacquelyn, pleasure. And we'll have to have you back on as things progress with token relations. But thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Tony. I appreciate it.